So, excuse me. So yesterday, spent a lot of time talking about the truth of dukkha and the cause of dukkha. And there's so much more to be said on that. And there's so much more subtlety to be drawn out and questions that need to be answered. But it's important to know that this is only half the story, right? Because if it was just that, if it was just there is suffering and it's caused by, or the origination of that suffering is supported and grounded in not seeing the true nature of reality, if it was just that, then it would be hopeless. But thankfully, the Buddha also teaches that the third noble truth, which is there is cessation of that suffering, and there is a path that leads to the cessation of that suffering. And Lama was talking yesterday about the Noble Eightfold Path being the path that leads to it, and beginning with right view. And the question immediately comes up, well, how do you go from not seeing the true nature of reality to seeing the true nature of reality, which is what right view is? And in order for that to even be contemplated, we have to have some sense that there is the unconditioned, the unborn, which is inexpressible. So everything we talked about yesterday, we were talking about was conditioned, subject to birth and death. And its whole mode is one of object and things that we break up into pieces and put back together, and we create this world which we then long for freedom from, bizarrely. We create it and then we long for freedom from it. So this, this longing for freedom is key to discovering the heart of Buddhism. This heart wish that when we look at our craving, when we look at our desires, when we look at the reason why we do anything, the reason why we grasp, and what is it we're really looking for? What is the deep need behind what we're doing? And it's the wish for enjoyment, the wish for pleasure, or the wish to be free from, at least free from the discomfort and the suffering. And of course, as long as we're not seeing the true nature of reality, we're always grasping at, in MVC terms, tragic strategies to relieve this. But the wish is still there. The wish to be free from suffering is still underlying everything. So, in the Upanisa Sutta, the Buddha says that freedom and the knowledge of that freedom has a support. And he goes through the links of this support from freedom disenchantment, seeing reality as it truly is, samadhi, bliss, tranquility, rapture, joy, and faith. And the support for faith is dukkha. So the way out of dukkha is faith. And this question then came up a lot yesterday. What do we mean when we're talking about faith? So what I'm hoping to talk about today is some of this process. And the suttas don't talk about it very much in terms of what faith actually is. But there is a text where an Arya Nagasena is answering some questions from the king, who says, what is faith? And Nagasena says, when a disciple has faith, their mind is clear and serene. Their mind has broken through the hindrances. Okay, so that doesn't tell us what faith is, but it tells us what the experience of faith would be. The experience of faith would be a mind that is clear, serene, and free from the hindrances of doubt, ill will, desire, agitation, sloth and torpor. So that sort of points us in this direction. When the Buddha is asked, how does avidya come about? He says, well, you can't say it's not fueled. He doesn't actually give the profound answer that most of us are looking for. How does avidya come about in the first place? But he does talk about how it's fueled, how it's perpetuated, if you like. And it's perpetuated through the hindrances, perpetuated through our unwholesome actions that are rooted in greed, hate, and delusion. It's perpetuated through not guarding our awareness by getting sucked into those worlds, those mandalas of delusion, through not having mindfulness, not having alertness, through improper attention, which is when unwholesome states arise, we grasp onto those, or we try to push them away, or we try to just switch them off. And it comes from not hearing the true Dharma, through not associating with good spiritual friends. So he says, and so how does faith come about? Faith comes about by hearing the true Dharma. You hear the true Dharma by associating with good spiritual friends. And it's very interesting, this word associating, because the Pali, the word is sangseva in Pali. And the Pali dictionaries call it associating with good people, just associating with. And Sanskrit means, yes, associating and meeting, but it also means revering and worshipping and serving. So see how the origins of how we're relating to those people who can teach us the Dharma have all of these qualities. Yes, associating with them, but also listening to them to receive wisdom. And when we're listening and approaching them in the right way, this is able for us to receive the adhisthana, the power of the wisdom that's going to cut through our confusion. And then we hear the right teaching, which is the basis for faith. But also, then it's the ground for knowing those qualities of mind that we should, or knowing the qualities of mind that we place our attention on. From yesterday's story about Super Buddha, when we get those qualities of serenity and clarity, the heart is uplifted, the heart becomes tender, and it's these qualities that we place our awareness on. And how do we do that? Mindfulness and alertness. And the mindfulness here means we remember the teachings that we've been given. We remember what was pointed out to us. We keep that in mind. And the alertness lets us know when we've moved off into agitation or dullness, which are the hindrances. And it allows us to come back. And it's this process that is the guarding of the senses, that doesn't allow us to get sucked into those worlds. And this is grounded on wholesome actions, wholesome behavior. And the three here, rather than the actions that are grounded, the unwholesome actions that are grounded in greed, hate, and delusion, we're looking at the opposite of that. Contentment, love, and understanding. The opposite of greed, hate, and delusion. So with a mind imbued with love, contentment, and understanding, that breaks through the hindrances. And faith is what's left. And faith then are the qualities that are present when grasping and aversion are not present, which is shamatha. So the path out of the unconditioned begins with faith, which is shamatha, and then discernment, which is vipassana. So you can see here the balance between faith, which is shraddha, and shamatha, and prajna, which is discernment and vipassana. So first we get a glimpse of the mind that is free from grasping when we have a glimpse of the truth that there is something beyond grasping. So this is a big point in our formless meditation and indestructible heart essence. It's not simply the process of letting go, it's the process of letting go into. We get a glimpse that there is a reality that is not conditioned. And it's that we acknowledge and align with. And I just want to pick out the point there about the mind imbued with contentment, love, and understanding. It's to make sure that we're not taking this practice as a separate thing other than what we were looking at last year, which is love and compassion. When we're employing this whole thing of listening to the teacher to receive wisdom, the meditation, we're turning towards our experience with love and compassion. Because any other attempt we might have at letting go of grasping is likely to be aversion, unless we're turning towards it with compassion. So, one of the links I put in here, in this document, openness and clarity and sensitivity of the heart, This comes from a sutta which is actually about resentment, which is we start getting, when we start having a glimpse of the unconditioned and we develop our practice, we start getting these experiences of serenity, even just moments of tender-heartedness, and then it all comes crashing back. Then we find ourselves agitated and disturbed and self-critical, angry, all those kinds of things. And even though this sutta is talking about others, it applies to ourselves, which is when we notice these qualities of ill will and doubt and confusion, when we notice that they're present, we don't get resentful, but we recognize if there is any moment of openness in the heart, any moment of clarity in the heart, it's that we align with. We don't focus on the failings. We don't focus on the ill will. We don't focus on that. We align ourselves with those moments of openness and clarity, which in the Emptiness Sutta are actually the joy and the tranquility. It's these the natural qualities of the heart when grasping isn't present. So if we move into the Emptiness Sutta, out of dukkha, by staying and looking at grasping, by staying and looking at craving and suffering, with this open, interested, tender heart, which we can do because we've had it pointed to by the true teachings, by listening to receive wisdom from the Guru, from the Buddha. When we look at dukkha in that way, for a moment grasping is seen as it really is, and it falls away, and what's revealed then is what's beyond that, what isn't that, which is ungraspable, undescribable, but it has the qualities of openness, clarity, and sensitivity. In the Emptiness Sutta, you recognize it as joy, rapture, tranquility, bliss, and maybe some stillness. And these are the qualities of shamatha. But of course, it's presented as if you get there once and then you go through these stages and then you see reality as it really is and ding, you're enlightened. And of course what we know is it's not like that, and Lama's really has really drilled this into us. This is spiral. We keep coming round again and again and again. And I think it's interesting to bring out that these qualities of peace, serenity, bliss, you hear them and maybe it becomes this very high state, and it's maybe worth bringing out that what we're talking about here is a spectrum. And I'll bring in something that came up from our sessions with Elizabeth Callahan, which she brought in the text from The Ocean of Definitive Meaning, which the 9th Karmapa, I think. And he says, you get these experiences of bliss. What do we mean by that? And he says, it might be a simple feeling of relief for a moment. You might get the thought, the Guru is so kind. You might get the thought that you want to give everything up and only live for the Dharma. You might want to sing and dance. You might laugh for no reason. You might start crying for no reason. Or you might feel confused. You might think that your meditation is a waste of time. all of these get classed within the term bliss. And it's really good to know that it's not always some kind of elevated, and I'm sure it can be really high elevated levels of ecstasy. But it also might just come in these tiny little signs, these little glimpses we get, that when for a moment we're not caught up in our usual habitual patterns of confusion and grasping and aversion. And I thought for a moment what I might do is just invite us for a second to see if this is something that we could recognize very simply and very quickly in our own experience right now. So if you would like, I'm going to ask you just to listen to a couple of the words from Discovering the Heart of Buddhism. And what I would like you to do is just to pay attention to your awareness as you hear it. And just notice what happens. Just the first immediate response that your heart has, or the first immediate response that your awareness does. Because what we're talking about here, when we're talking about the unconditioned, Lama talks about in Discovering the Heart of Buddhism as the indestructible heart essence. So I'd like to just read a sentence from that. And just allow yourself to pay attention what happens to your awareness as you hear it. The indestructible heart essence is a reality which is beyond all suffering and confusion. Wishing for it in your heart, relax into the thought of it and think that you are allowing it to permeate and pervade your whole being. And now just imagine if you had complete, unshakable confidence in that. Notice what happens in your awareness. And maybe, when we did this on the recent Shamatha retreat, it was very interesting to get feedback, but there's so many people here, I'm not going to do that. But maybe, for a moment, you had a hint of possibility, a hint that there's something here that might be true, a hint of letting go, a hint of openness. And what we're doing with Discovering the Heart of Buddhism is taking that immediate intuition of kind of direct experience of something and developing confidence in that. Because that's what we're being pointed to through these teachings. This is what faith really means. It is that experience. It's not unfounded. So in Gampopa's Jewel Ornament of Liberation, he says there's three kinds of faith, or three kinds of confidence. And the first is to get confidence in the truth of dukkha and the cause of dukkha, and that the dukkha is fueled and perpetuated and caused by our clinging and unwholesome, clinging to what's unwholesome, let's say. And you get that it's not simply, yes, of course there is. It's, oh, so that's what the experience is. We get some glimpse that we can turn towards it. This is what anger is. This is what fear is. And we get confidence in that because it's something we can experience. It's not something that we get caught up in. We can actually turn towards it. So we develop confidence in that. That's the first kind of confidence. The second kind of confidence is, well, if dukkha has a cause, there must be a way out. So we get confidence in the path, and we get confidence that we can follow a path. That there is a path to follow. That what's being pointed out to us might be worth keeping going on. We develop that confidence. And then finally, you have the confidence, the clear, unshakable confidence in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Lama Shenpen talks about, in the book of confidence, the confidence that comes from the power of our own discernment. That there is something, we have a faculty that is able to distinguish what is wholesome from unwholesome, what is true from false, and that this is a faculty we have that we can trust and develop. The second is confidence in the truth of the teachings. We hear the teachings, we're able to know what is true about them, and we then have the confidence to follow through and put that into practice. And third is the confidence in this indestructible heart essence, the truth that is beyond suffering and confusion. So you can see how the parallels here work between what Gampopa is saying and what Lama Shenpen is saying. And then in the Pali Suttas, the importance of recognizing, yes, there is doubt. Yes, there is ill will and confusion. But I've also had something else pointed out to me. So I can turn towards my experience with ever-growing confidence. And when I do, I might get a glimpse of the truth of that. And then that confidence grows. So, anytime you turn up to a Buddhist teaching and they talk about faith, almost like a spontaneous reflex, they go, oh, but it's not blind faith. In every talk, because this is what we're talking about. We're talking about a confidence in our actual experience that can be seen and followed through with and realized. And it's not there all the time. We know that. Or at least the freedom from it isn't there all the time. Or at least we don't see it. So then as we're following through on this path of the spiral learning of coming back to this experience and developing deeper confidence in it, the more that the grasping at what is false stops having so much command over us, that actually our mind starts becoming easier and more enjoyable to be with. And when we develop enough certainty in that, we can then bring in this kind of investigation. So what actually is this world that we take to be so real? And the Pali Suttas talk about this a lot in terms of how we're approaching the skandhas, the collections, the heap of stuff that we break up into pieces and put back together. When we are able to turn towards that with right understanding, we see, this is not me. I am not this. I am not this feeling. I am not this object. This object does not belong to me. This is not mine. This is not the self. I know what is not self. And if we get enough stability in this mandala, that is a mandala of clarity and letting go, we're much more able to see when mandalas of confusion appear and we don't get so sucked into them. And it's at that point that then we go on to sort of deeper levels of meditation of seeing the true nature of being as it is, in the right way, as Lama pointed out yesterday morning, we actually start seeing this is liberation. And we become disenchanted with our previous ideas and grasping habitual patterns. No longer have the same, they no longer take us to the same place, because we're now starting to see it as it really is. And this can be really helped in terms of going deeper in our meditation practice. The Satipatthana talks about it in terms of, at that point we're able to look at these experiences of body, feeling, mind, and we investigate them. We look at them to see, what is it internally, what is it externally, what is it both? And we see that all appearances, everything everything that appears is mind, is created, produced. That maybe some of those fixed ideas of internal and external, that's also mind. That's a view I've created. And then we'll look to see, okay, so now look and see what is arising, what is ceasing. And then you see the mind doesn't arise or cease. It has nothing that you could say could be arising or ceasing. Is thinking different from mind? Is arising different? Where would it arise from? And then when we see the mind as it really is, or what's appearing as it really is, if it's not arising or ceasing in the way that it has been, it is just as it is, which I think Lama would call, it's all of a piece. It is spontaneous, slundrup, all of a piece, and self-arising, self-liberating. It doesn't, this is so deep as to the difference between what we thought was arising is never really comes into being. And then if we can remain there without grasping or aversion in regard to anything, without regard to anything in the world, and the world is what we were talking about yesterday, then that's when this process of liberation can take place, because we are resting then in spontaneous liberation. We see it as it really is. It is liberation. And I think that's probably enough for this talk. So I'm sure that this brings up far more questions. Oh, actually, there is something else I'd like to say. When we were talking yesterday about how this happens, how do we practice to get this faith and get this kind of liberation? I noticed in the Mahamudra Pranidhana, it follows this same path that we saw in this diagram of faith and confidence in the indestructible heart essence. By listening to scripture and reasoning, may I be liberated from the cloud of ignorance. So ignorance and avidya, creating that whole world of delusion. By reflecting on the oral instructions, may I overcome the darkness of doubt. So we're listening to receive wisdom, we're listening to the true Dharma, and the faith that arises breaks through the hindrance of doubt. But then by the light arising from meditation, may I see the true state as it really is. So we see that that's encaptured here. And I'll also bring in one last parallel, which is, if you've got the map in front of you, this diagram of the Emptiness Sutta. Don't worry if you haven't, but you can refer to it later. In the prayer for realization, you can see, by the power of your adhisthana, by the power of the power of awakening that comes from the mandala of awakening, may I abandon the self-clinging mind. The self-clinging mind is that world of dukkha. By the power of your adhisthana, may contentment arise in my being. That's all of this shamatha, bliss, tranquility, rapture, joy, contentment arise in my being. By the power of your adhisthana, may all non-dharmic thinking cease. We arrive at immersion and samadhi. May I realize the chitta, the unborn. May I see the true state as it really is. May confusion liberate itself. See freedom and knowledge arising out of that. And may I realize the world is Dharmakaya, and we go back to see what we originally took as suffering, its true nature. So there's a nice little parallel coming in here for us to reflect on how these two things might come together. So yes, I think that's everything. So thank you very much. I hope it hasn't, well, it probably has left you with more questions than we started with. And maybe over the next few lifetimes we'll work it out together. So thank you very much. Lama, is there anything you'd like to add, or perhaps kind of shine a light on any confusion that I might have thrown up?
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. A very clear exposition. And as you say, there's many sort of questions left hanging there. So I was very happy with the questions that came through from yesterday. I thought, oh, they're egging us on. These are the questions that we're pursuing, and you're on the set, so we'll be able to look at those this afternoon. Yeah, that's the key. You were going to explain this diagram more, but I couldn't follow where you were. You don't about to finish the Sutta, and maybe it's because it's such small writing, but I can't. Oh, there it is.
Yeah. I actually did it on A3, you see, so it's been squashed down into A4. Yeah, the Emptiness Sutta is that whole stretch up on the right-hand side. And when I was talking about the conditions for faith, that's the circle on the left-hand side, and relating then faith and the shamatha, which is that sort of middle section of the Emptiness Sutta. Relating faith with drawing that left-hand circle of faith into the right-hand circle on the Upanisa, and showing how faith is related to the qualities of shamatha. So rather than going through them one by one, I sort of lump them all together.
That's the joy, rapture, tranquility, bliss, and immersion. So,
Yeah, I decided not to go through them sort of technically one by one, because I think that that's something we could do in the study group. We can go through it in a little bit more precision.
Mm-hmm. So in the Emptiness Sutta, I'm trying to work out where you begin. You start with dukkha. What was the question in that sutta?
Well, it starts off in that sutta with knowledge and ending have a support or a supporting condition, and that supporting condition is freedom, which has the condition of dispassion, which has the condition of disenchantment, the condition of seeing, and so forth, all the way down to faith. And faith has a supporting condition, which is dukkha, and then it goes through birth and death, and so forth, all the way down through the 12 links to avijja. So what I've put in the circle there is just dukkha is the whole 12 links that we were talking about yesterday. So that's shorthand for all of the other links.
Right. And that's what you said.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then on the other corner you've got form and indestructible and permanent and so on.
Ah, yeah. This is a formula which comes up a lot in the Skanda collection, which is the pointing out bit that the Buddha gives when he's talking about what people are clinging to, and then he says, and I really do get the sense that this is done in a meditation interview as opposed to just a theoretical position, which is you're looking at your mind and you see that you're grasping or you're craving the desires that come from, let's say, form. And he's saying, and look at that. Is form permanent or impermanent? And they say it's impermanent. And so if it's impermanent, is it dukkha or sukha? And they say it's dukkha. So if it's impermanent and it's dukkha and subject to change, is it fit to be regarded as self? And they say no. Okay, so seeing that with this clear vision, you realize form is not self. And then this whole process from the Upanishad, as you see it as it really is, disenchantment, dispassion, freedom, and knowledge and ending. So the kind of the two formula work together like that. Mm-hmm. And I think I put it in there because I think it's important that this connection between what is impermanent is dukkha. Not simply all things are impermanent and we just have to live with that. It's these things are impermanent and they are dukkha, and therefore they're not fit to be regarded as self. It's quite an important point, isn't it?
It's very important. So I'm just trying to read it. Above it says, I say that knowledge and freedom are fueled by something. What is the fuel? So where's that from?
That's another sutta entirely, which is talking about, so we've got the knowledge and freedom of the Upanishad Sutta, which seems to have these other causes. And he also says, but here we've got the 7 awakening factors of mindfulness, I can't remember exactly, mindfulness, equanimity, joy, sukha, investigation of dharmas. I can't remember them all. In the Satipatthana Sutta, once we get into mindfulness of the dharmas, it goes through mindfulness of the hindrances, then it goes into mindfulness of the awakening factors, then mindfulness, I think then it goes into the 4 noble truths. So kind of recognizing that it's understanding these all of these is part of the process of liberation.
So those are where did this fueling part fit in with the Upanishad?
Because the 7 awakening factors seem to have, so first you've got knowledge and freedom, which are at the top of the Upanishad Sutta. Right. And the awakening factors include investigation of dharmas to see and know as it truly is. And then there are these other things like tranquility and rapture. So they're sort of part of the same system with a slightly different order.
Right. And where did you say that was?
I can't remember it. I haven't put a link to it, but it'll be. It's a common formula.
Right. And then the avijja freedom.
Yeah. So the link that I've put there, avijja, links to the text where that whole diagram underneath comes in.
What is that text?
It's called avijja. It's called ignorance. Avijja Sutta.
Right. And then it explains it in terms of associations of hearing the Dharma.
Yeah.
Having senses. Right. Very interesting, isn't it?
It is.
Very interesting. So the whole context really of looking at the teacher samadhi within that context. You just don't come in as an intellectual who just wants to kind of get at, what is the Buddha's view on truth or something. It's more like you're already committed to opening to that transmission, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that the opening to the transmission is the really important point. I know there were a couple of questions yesterday about where does karma come into this, or, why isn't it fit within Praticca Samuppada? And my feeling is, sort of my understanding of reading it, is this is not trying to explain karma and rebirth. It's actually the point of saying it's a sort of a pointing out instructions. Right now, if there is grasping, stay right there. What is also there? Why are you grasping? And then staying right there, this kind of, you get pointed to the true Dharma, which is then the basis for faith and the liberation. So rather than sort of getting involved in things like, what did I do? Who was I in the past? What will I be in the future? You just go, if there is grasping, there is grasping. If there is desire, there is desire in you right now. Stay right there. That's what to look at. So it doesn't go into karma, because in this teaching, we're not talking about karma. We're talking about what's immediate right here, right now, and the liberation from that.
I think that's really, really important. I sort of woke up this morning feeling just how important that was. That's what the Perpetuation Samuppada is. That is what it is. It's right here and now, what you can actually experience. All of a piece. And teachings on karma. Well, they always say karma is only Buddhas understand karma to so deep. But there is a kind of rule of some teachings on karma that they're given. Well, these kind of actions are going to lead these kind of results, so watch out. But you don't really need to believe in karma to see that. Like in the Kamala Sutra, the Buddha makes it clear. You can see already it creates a negative state of mind to negative things. You don't really need to believe in past or future lives for that to be true. I think it's an important point. It is true, but you can just see it right here and now, and you can become liberated right here and now.
Yeah, and there's I picked up on this in one of the really early ones in the Digha Nikaya. I think the Buddha's talking about the views again, and he says there are those people who praise the Buddha because he has really good ethical behavior, and he said that's what normal people do. That's what people who don't really understand do. They're praising just ethical behavior. But I've seen dharmas that are more subtle than that. And that's what we should be praising awakening for, is not just the kind of wholesome actions and seeing that unwholesome actions lead to unwholesome consequences. Okay, it seemed like almost everybody would agree with that. I'm looking at the dharmas that are more subtle than that. And that's what the Buddha should be praised for.
He was calling them dharmas, was he?
Yeah.
Then the other thing that I kept wondering about was, well, I suppose it was linking to this idea of karma, and why the teaching sometimes doesn't talk about action, doesn't talk paper and then you act and you get that consequences, it doesn't talk about that. And I was thinking, so anyway, how to, what is that process? So I'm doing what the Buddha said, don't you?
Yeah.
But I anyway. And then I kind of came back again and again to this term, samskaras. It's in the Heart Sutra it's called formations. Another thing is called choices or volition. But I thought that's a very wide range of different possibilities of what samskaras might be, but they're definitely samskara means to make, and in Tibetan duce is to make by bringing things together to make something. And then I was thinking about, like, when you don't understand the true nature, then these samskaras sort of come into play. But what would they be? What are we actually talking about? Yeah. And then I realised, oh, yes, the Buddha said this was very deep, very profound. It's not something easy. Like, just said, well, it's quite straightforward, and I get that. And the Buddha said, I don't think so. So if you don't see it as deep and profound and difficult to understand, then you may go, probably you won't be missing the point. It's something very. And in a way, as you were saying today, I really liked what you were saying today, that really emphasising this is something that we realise in our own experience right here and now, through our meditation, through the Vipassana, which is based on the shamatha. And I think it's brilliant the way you're bringing out these qualities of shamatha, because we do tend to skip over it a bit and say, well, shamatha is a little bit of sort of setting the mind. But actually, it's there's a lot to understand about it.
Yeah, and what came out in our shamatha retreat was the importance of equanimity here, and how that balances with the apramanas. And the word I mentioned to you last week, the word equanimity, upekkha, comes from having superior vision, higher vision, a wider perspective, which is a really important factor here, because it's that wider perspective that gives us we don't get so easily sucked into the habitual patterns. So developing that equanimity allows all of these qualities of mind to be present and allows us to turn our mind towards deeper dharmas. So yeah, really important, I think.
That was the scheduled time, wasn't it? We can continue.
Ta-da!
We can continue the discussion this afternoon.
Yeah, thank you. Should we dedicate?
No.
Is there anything you guys want us to focus on in our discussion?
Did you have something to
Well, I think this morning's talk was mostly about kind of integrating this with our practice and seeing this in the light of the DHB. So I suppose it's just what has this talk brought up, and has it kind of given you a better understanding of how it fits with DHB, and if not, where are the sticking points, I suppose. Yeah. Sure you'll find something to talk about. We always do. We dedicate this punya to the enlightenment of all sentient beings. May all sentient beings realize complete and perfect awakening. May the heart's awareness awaken in the unawakened. Where it has begun to stir, may it never fade, and may it awaken fully. Janjub samne rimboje mache banam jejejik cheba nyampa me padam gane gandu pelwaju. Janjub samne rimboje mache banam jejejik cheba nyampa me padam gane gandu pelwaju. Chanjub samne lamboje mache banam jejejik cheba nyamba me padam gane gandu pelwaju.